name is Les, and I'd like to talk to you today about how I ended up needing a service dog and why I started the organization called Respect the Service Dog. I used to be a Class 1 truck driver, and I would make anywhere from $80,000 to $110,000 a year. And I ended up with a hernia, which was simple day surgery. And I went in and done my surgery, and 2 days later I went to the hospital. They took my blood pressure, and it was rather elevated. It was around 180 over 110, and they admitted me in the hospital, and I think I was in there at that time about a week. They made up a cocktail of medication and brought it down, and they discharged me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had a blood pressure monitor. And by 8 o'clock the same night that I was discharged, but 8 o'clock the same night, once again I was in the hospital with elevated blood pressure. And once again they admitted me, and then they got it down with medication. They discharged me, and this went on for 3 or 4 months, and they couldn't find what was causing it. And in the meantime I moved into an apartment, and it was a rather nice home. And the lady underneath me, in the apartment under me, she 94 years old, and one day in late August she was brutally murdered, and her apartment was set on fire. And that triggered something in me that was a long-lasting effect that happened early in my childhood, and with this murder and stuff, it really highlighted another mental illness that I'll get into a little bit later. But back to my blood pressure. They couldn't control it, and by now I was seeing a specialist in Calgary, Dr. Michael Hill, and some of his students, and not only could they not control it, they couldn't stop it. And within, we tried playing with some of the medication, and nothing was working, and by now I was having seizures, my eye damage, and kidney damage, and my heart was like a football. And I was pretty much told to make arrangements, and they were talking about doing some experimental stuff. They wanted to put a pacemaker in me with the leads going into my arteries, and to tell the brain to lower the blood pressure. And if that wasn't going to work, they were going to sever the nerves to my kidneys. At this time, my blood pressure was as high as 273 over 168, and I was told that pretty much the only reason why I was still alive, because the increase was so gradual that my body kind of, to a certain degree, adjusted. However, you can only put so much air in the balloon. So when I was told about this experimental stuff, and it was clinical studies, and there was going to be a whole process for me to be entered into it or accepted. There's also some studies that service dog helped lower some blood pressure. So I told Dr. Hill about this. He said, if you're going to do it, you do it now, because at this rate you don't have much time. So I picked up Annie, my service dog, at the end of November of 2012. I seen Dr. Hill in the end of January of 2013, and for the first time in a number of years, my blood pressure plateaued. It wasn't climbing, it wasn't coming down, and Dr. Hill said, I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, let's not mess it up. And then I seen Dr. Hill, I believe it was in late March or early April of 2013. And for the first time in a number of years, my blood pressure started to come down. And I seen him about 3 months after that, and I think it was in July, it came down to about, I'd say 140 over 100. And for some people that's still relatively high. And Dr. Hill said, we'd be happy if it stayed there, at least that's manageable. And they took my blood pressure not too long ago, about a month ago. and my blood pressure was 117 over 78. Now, nothing has changed. They never changed my medication. They never done the clinical studies or the experimental procedures. And the only thing that changed was Annie, my service dog, came into my life. So Annie has detection abilities. She will give me anywhere from 10, 15 half-hour notice on the possibility of having a seizure. And I used to think that she was giving me false alerts. What I found is when she alerted me and I'd get on the floor and I would get comfortable, that it's almost, I never had a seizure, and I used to think that was false alerts or Annie was giving me, and I come to realize now that maybe after the alert, when I go and lay down on the floor and prepare for this, and Annie comes and lays down beside me, and it passes. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we don't give these amazing animals, as in service dogs, the credit that they deserve. I have PTSD. My PTSD, I've never spent a day or even a minute in the military. There's some misconceptions about post-traumatic stress disorder, that maybe it's just the military or the first responders or law enforcement that get into that dilemma or that disorder. And the real cause, or not the real, but the leading cause of PTSD is believe it or not, child abuse, and domestic abuse and sexual assault, and a number of other reasons or causes that make people or people get inflicted with. When I was 4 years old, I have a scar here on my left hand, and that scar used to be the excuse for everything I ever did in my life. You know, I mean, it took me to, anyway. When I was 4 years old, my mother put my arm through the ringer of a washing machine. And I can remember it like it happened yesterday. I mean, I've played it in my mind a million times over throughout my life. And I can remember, you know, I was, how old are you? At 4 years old, and you know, my mother was off in the kitchen or something. I don't know. I grabbed a 5-gallon honey pail or a chair or something, and I put it beside this ringer wash machine. And 4 years old, and in there, I'll help you, mommy. I'll help you. I'll help you, mommy. And my mother had some serious issues of her own, and she said, "Here, you wanna effing help?" And she put my left arm through the ringer of a wash machine, and I screamed so loud that the neighbor, his name is Frank Bernier, came over, and you know, there's blood coming out of my hand, and he put a towel on it, and he put me and my mother in the car and took me to Dr. Ben Schwartz. I can remember, like, as I mentioned before, I played it a million times in my head. I remember screaming to Dr. Ben Schwartz, "Mommy done this, mommy done this, mommy done this." Now we have to remember that this is in 1961. And things were a little different then than they are now, thank God. And after he sewed up my hand, and I'm screaming there, "Mommy done this, mommy done this," and like when we think about it today, like why would a 4-year-old even be making something like that up? And Dr. Schwartz there, he sewed it up, cleaned it up, he put me back in my mother's arms and told her. By no means am I saying this to try and criticize my mother. Like I said earlier, my mother had some of her own problems, and I just want to put it out there as factual of what happened. I am the second youngest of 5 children, and I'm the youngest. All my life, I can't remember my mother ever telling me once that she loved me, or that she gave me a hug, or that she ever told me good job, or any kind of compliment at all. There was just nothing there. My parents split up when I was very young, and the lasting memory I have of anything that my mother told me was you're going to be a no good drunken bum just like your father. And you know, as with untreated and undiagnosed PTSD, it took me to places that no human being ought to go, and very, very few people make it out alive. I ended up on Skid Row. I was in my early 20s. Done all kinds of things to society, done stuff to people in society that I don't remember, you know, and in and out of prison. And it is what it is. I look back on it, and yes, I do have some regrets, and like yeah, I have this whole range of emotions. Am I using my mental illness as a justification or as an excuse? And I try not to look at it that way. It is a reason. It's a reason no different than a first responder or a veteran that goes and recognizes and sees all this trauma. However, my PTSD is similar, the same, but different, because mine is a result of child abuse. I see abuse everywhere. I see it in traffic, people cutting people off, or popping the birdie, or rolling down their window and screaming at somebody. I see it in the workplace. I see it with employers and employees, and I see it in the mall with people with their children. It's just magnified for me, and the elderly woman got murdered, and I realized then that I had to seek some kind of professional help. And this was before I got any. And the first thing I told the psychiatrist was, I don't want any medication. I don't want anything that's going to alter my capacity to think properly, even though I couldn't think properly. And he said, just talk to me, and he took me back through my life, and there was no shock value with him, and he looked at me and he said, you have PTSD, and not only do you have PTSD, your PTSD has gone untreated all your life, probably since the time that your mother done that to you with your arm, and maybe even before that. And it was then that, and I realized that, you try and get some justification, but you also try and get some awareness, and sometimes that awareness isn't healthy. I went through my life, and I took inventory of it. Here I was, because of my blood pressure, I was basically on looking at death. I used to wake up in the morning not knowing if I'd make it through the day, and go to bed at night not knowing if I'd wake up because of my blood pressure issues. When I took inventory of my life, and I realized that there was a unmeasurable amount of damage I had done to people and to society, and I realized that maybe it's time to try and make some amends. And I looked at it that there's some, probably not enough, some organizations supplying service dogs. There was nobody really doing any public awareness. And after I got Annie, it was being bombarded with are you training the dog, or what do you need the dog for? Geez, you got a nice dog, or can I pet your dog? And anybody with a service dog knows the dilemma that some of us, or most of us, or even all of us, go through when we go in public. And I decided to try and do my own little part with it, and I started a group or an organization called Respect the Service. The sad part is a lot of people can't see past the dog, and the fact is that there's two ends to the end of this dog leash. And I have to live my life on the end of one end of it. And people don't understand. So do I blame them people? Not really. I don't blame for being uninformed. There's some segment of society that we're never going to teach. I do go into elementary schools because I believe that that's the generation that we have to inform. And I try and do my own little part. I don't have any corporate sponsor. I don't have any provincial funding or government funding, and I sell T-shirts and hats and Mr. bags, and try and pay my own way to do whatever I can in my own little way. Part of another reason why I started Respect the Service Dog, like I mentioned earlier, I'd done all this damage to people in society, and in my own little way, it's kind of trying to make amends to society and try and clear off the slate, or at least balance the scale. So there's kind of a spiritual foundation as to why I started Respect the Service Dog, and it's not about the money, and it's not even about me, and it's by the time these elementary children grow up and become adults, and hopefully responsible adults when it comes to service dogs, or informed adults, I'll be long gone. And this is not about me. It's never been about me. Some people call me the founder of Respect the Service Dog, and I actually was talking to somebody, I believe, last thing. I said, really, in reality, Annie, my service dog, that is the founder. She's the founder of Respect the Service Dog. Because if it wasn't for Annie, and if it wasn't for really my illness, what was diagnosed as malignant resistant hypertension, and if it wasn't for my PTSD, and if it wasn't for all this stuff to fall into place, there probably would be no Respect the Service Dog, or at least no Respect the Service Dog on my part. So, is my work done? No, I don't think so. And up until now, other than selling T-shirts and messenger bags and stuff online, it's been a long haul. I put out some pamphlets and done some trade shows and done my own fundraising, and now it seems like things are starting to fall into place where more and more people are coming forward to support, and there is a day where I'd like to turn it over. I'd like to be able to make it national and turn it over to people that have the same values and concerns and motives and ethics that I do, and try and do our best for the benefit of all people: veterans, first responders, sexual assault victims of abuse, and inform the courts that yes, there is issues, and if we deal with the underlying issues, the amount of savings to society is immeasurable. Even the savings to healthcare. For me to be into some of these clinical studies, one would have to wonder just how much is the cost. And along comes Annie and the benefits of my health, benefits of public awareness, the benefits of cost to society, whether financial or other reasons. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you to all the supporters, and the journey's only begun. We still have a lot of work to do, and I hope that you could support me in my t-shirts and my messenger bags, or my caps, or bumper stickers, or it's sometimes just moral support. There's lots of times I felt like giving up, and it was my friends and my supporters that said, no, Les, you got to keep going. There's more to it than you realize. And so that was it. There was a number of reasons. My disease and my mental illness, and the fact that now I have a loving dog, and I have to live my life from the end of a dog leash that a lot of people don't understand, and that's one of the main reasons why I started Respect the Service Dog. And thank you, and God bless, and time to meet Annie. Annie, up, come, up. Good girl, yeah, good girl. See the camera? Look at the camera. Hey. Okay, I'm okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Big sucky. See the camera?